All right, so this is the very first card that we're going to create today. So the very first thing we need to do is die cut this flower out of 3/4 sheets of cardstock plus the card base. So I already have those pieces ready here. So here's my card base, and then I've got 3/4 sheets of cardstock. Now this flower die happens to be a bit of a simpler die. So when you die cut it, it will actually cut through 2 sheets of cardstock. Sometimes when you do this, it will only cut through 1 sheet of cardstock and it will just put an impression on the next one, which is what's going to happen with the next card, and I'll tell you what to do with that. So I have some die tape here, and this is the same die tape that I use to do all my samples, so it's very well used. You can use the same piece of die tape over and over and over again. Make sure that your pieces of paper are all lined up with each other, because we're trying to get this die cut in exactly the same spot for every single piece of paper or piece of cardstock. So for this, I run it one way and then run it back just so it has pressure from both sides. This one here I'm going to take off, and I already took the die out of, or die cut out of that first layer. This one here, I can just push the die cut out. It does die cut through that. These actual flower die cuts we're not going to use in this class, so you can put them aside for a future project. And because, so there we go, because it die cuts all the way through, I can leave this die on this piece of cardstock and then just line up my next piece of cardstock with it, put it in, and die cut the same way. Now this ends up saving time because you don't have to take that die off the first piece of paper. You can just line it up with the next piece of paper and put it through. There we go. So it just came right out of that one. And the die cut actually went into that die rather than fight with it and try to take it out, because it's not really necessary at that point. I'm going to line it up with my card base, and for this I want to take a couple pieces of tape and I want to tape them in place because I don't want this to shift at all. The other ones I wasn't too worried about it because those pieces of paper were the same size and laid right on top of each other. This one, because there's a tail off of it, I don't want a chance that it's going to shift. So here we go. I'm going to take the piece of tape off. And when you first use your tape, it's going to stick really, 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 really well, because the pressure of that machine running it through really makes it bond with the paper. So you want to be careful when you're taking it off. For these 3 layers on the top of the card, one of them is going to be the front, so one needs to be kind of perfect. The other 2, because this one here actually happened to tear, even though these pieces of tape have been well used. This piece of paper that has, or this piece of cardstock that is torn, I can use it on one of the inner layers, so I don't need to worry too much about that being shown. But you still want to be careful because that tape does leave a bit of a press, a bit of an impression within the cardstock. So I'm trying to keep these layers as perfect as possible so that I have a choice as to which one I want to use for my top layer. All right. And simpler shapes are going to die cut much easier and going to be able to be taken out of the cardstock much easier. This one, it is die cut, but it's holding on in a few places, so it's wanting to fight a little bit. And like I said, we don't need to keep these flower die cuts for this card, but I am still being careful with them because it's nice to have some die cuts pre-cut for future projects. So I don't necessarily want to rip them as I'm coming out, so I do want to be careful with them. All right, there we go. That one is out. This one here, we can take the tape off. And the nice thing about using the same piece of tape over and over again is it does get a little bit easier to work with, a little bit less sticky. But if it's less sticky to the point where it's not actually holding your die in place, then you do need to replace it with a new piece of tape. All right, so we've got our 3 pieces of cardstock here, die cut, plus our flower base, and then they all line up. Oh, I tore the back of the die cut on this part here, but we can fix that there. All right, so I'll see you in the next video where we will do the actual stained glass technique on this card.